Hey guys, welcome back to Pydjango-Tutorials. So in the last video, we learned Kubernetes core concepts and components in theory. Now we'll run them for real on Minikube. So we'll create our own pods, we'll create our own deployments, replica sets, and services. So you can see exactly how they connect and work together. If you remember from the last video, I told you that for managing pods, we create deployments, but pods can be created standalone as well. It's just way easier for us to manage pod using deployments. But to create deployment, we need to understand how pods are created. So the very first thing we'll do is create our own pod, and then we'll see how we can convert that same pod to the deployment. So let's get started with that. So the very first thing I'll do is create a file called pod.yaml. Now, before doing anything, if you don't know what YAML is just human readable data serialization language. So these kind of files are mainly used for configurations for your applications so that data can be stored or transmitted in a structured and easy to read format. So whatever we write in YAML, it's easily understandable by anyone. That's why we use these kind of files within our Kubernetes. So every resources that we'll create will be a YAML file in one or the other way. So let's get started with that. Now I'm gonna follow along with the documentation. So I would suggest that you should be following documentation as well because when you're working in real setup or real cluster, most of the time you need to refer to the official documentation provided by Kubernetes. So I want you to have this habit of looking everything within their documentation. And and just to inform you that their documentation is well maintained and it's easy to understand. So anytime you feel stuck, please make sure to refer to the documentation. And still, if you're not able to figure it out, drop the comments. I'll be happy to help you. Now, coming back to our pod, I'm gonna write this pod from the very scratch. So the very first thing I'll do is, or what we have to mention is API version. In this case, it's v1. Now, don't worry about what things I'm writing, just write with me as it is. Once we have our very first part running, I'll explain to you what each of these things mean. Second thing that we need is kind. So kind will be pod, then metadata, so that's name. And we can give any name here. So I'm gonna name it demo NGINX Pod. And then we can give few labels. Now labels are very important in Kubernetes, and I'll tell you why later on, but for now, just bear with me and keep writing. Demo NGINX, and then we have spec. And when you're writing this, make sure that these tabs and indentation are aligned as well, because these are really important. And why, I'll tell you in a bit. But make sure to give these tabs and indentations. Containers, then containers, we have name, I can do NGINX, maybe use 1.25 Alpine, and we have ports. We have container port. Now, before applying these changes or creating the actual pod within our Kubernetes cluster or Minikube cluster, let's understand what each of these things mean and what have I written actually. So the very first thing that I mentioned is API version. So what API version is, this just defines which version of the Kubernetes API we are using. So V1 here means it belongs to the core group of Kubernetes objects, which is pods and services. Then we have kind. So kind basically tells us what kind of resource are we creating. So in this case, we are creating a pod kind of resource, which is the smallest deployable unit in Kubernetes. Then we have metadata. Metadata is just like extra information about your pod. So we have names, we have labels, and you can give any name to your pod. You can give any number of labels. These labels will be later on used to identify your pods, and how we use these labels we'll see later. Then we have most important part of the pod or the pod definition file, that is spec. So the spec section is where we describe what we actually want inside the pod. So we define list of containers. So in YAML, this hyphen, this basically tells us that it's a list of containers. So even though here we only have one containers, it's still a list. So we use dash. This container is called NGINX and it uses Docker image 1.25 Alpine. That means it will pull NGINX version 1.25 lightweight Alpine Linux version, which is already hosted in Docker Hub as a public image for us to use. The ports section tells Kubernetes that this container listens on port 80. That's, if you don't know, that's a default web server port as well. So now that you know what each of these things mean, and by the way, this is very basic pod. Pod can be as complex as you want, but we'll see more complex pods as we go further. But now this is very simple definition of a pod. And now we want to apply this pod. Now for applying, where do we want to apply? In our Kubernetes cluster. And if you don't remember from the last video, or I think second last video, you have to start Minikube to access your cluster. So let's do that. So I already have my Docker daemon running or Docker desktop running. I already have the Ubuntu terminal. So let me access that. So there's my Ubuntu terminal. So what I'm gonna do is do Minikube status. Let's check the status. So right now it's stopped. So I'm gonna do Minikube start and we'll wait for it to start. It will pull the image from the Docker, which is running in your system, the Docker desktop, which already has the image for the Minikube. Okay, so our image has been downloaded and Minikube has been started. So our local Kubernetes cluster is up and running, and this is where we want to apply our pod or apply this particular pod. By applying, I mean start this particular pod. Now, before doing that, let's understand few of the basics command. For applying anything or accessing resource from the Kubernetes cluster, we use the CLI tool called kubectl, which is provided by Kubernetes itself. So to get all the existing pods, I can do kubectl get pods. This will give me the list of all the pods that are already running in the cluster. Now, obviously, right now, I don't have any pods at all in my cluster. That's why I don't see anything in my Kubernetes cluster. So you see the message, no resource found in default namespace. Now, don't worry about the namespace. We'll understand in detail what namespace are. But as of now, I don't have any pod running in my cluster. So let's apply our change. So for applying, I'm gonna copy the path. I'm gonna do kubectl apply. So these are all the commands that I'm gonna use. You don't need to memorize these commands. Once you get hold of it or you practice them enough, you'll get used to it anyway. So you don't have to memorize them at all. So for now, if you're not sure what command to use, just Google it, or check the official documentation. It's very easy to figure out these commands. So I'm gonna do kubectl apply. -f indicates that I want to apply a particular file, and then I can paste the path of the file. Now this is Windows path, and I'm within the so I'm gonna change the path to Linux friendly, and we don't write drive C as this. Instead, in Linux, we write this. Now, this is my correct path according to Linux environment, and if I hit enter, oh, there must be something wrong with our path, so let's debug. Oh, I get it. At the end, you need to have one more slash, and now it should be good. It's complaining that your name cannot be uppercase. That's a good thing. So it should be lowercase. Now, if I run this again, and you see the message that pod has been created. Now, if I do kubectl get pods, I see this particular pod running. And age is basically how long ago it was created. Status is running and it's ready. Restarts basically tells us how many times this pod has been restarted. Right now it's 0, but there will be scenarios when your pod automatically restart based on configuration changes or anything. So you'll see this count or this number increasing. So don't worry about that. So congratulations, you have your very first pod up and running. That's a huge milestone actually. Now for the sake of keeping these video tutorials short, we'll create deployments and services in another video or in separate videos and see how these all things club together and connect and run as the whole ecosystem. But as of now, thank you for watching, and if you have any doubt, feel free to drop the comment. I'll be more than happy to help you guys. Till then, thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.